Guys, it's Jeff here, the photographer's mentor. So this is second live in 2 days. And today we're going to be talking about alt text and keywords. And this is a really important part of getting your images found, getting your brand and yourself found online. Now, I'm not an expert on it, but Carolyn and Clemency are both experts in keywording and alt text. And they're going to explain how it can affect our website, our social media, getting more visibility for our brand and getting our images out there. So it's really, really important and quite underused by photographers and also quite misunderstood by photographers. And at the end of this, we're going to have a little slideshow presentation so we can go in and demonstrate and show some real examples. And the girls would like to also offer to do a free keyword audit for the first 10 people to put their details into the comment section. So all you've got to do is just in the comments say, I'm up for an audit, and the first 10 people will do a mini keyword audit of their images, and Carolyn and Clemency will get in contact with you later on. So if you just pop in the comments where you're watching from, I'm going to bring Carolyn and Clemency in and they can introduce themselves, and then we'll get the show started. So thanks, guys. Hi there. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Doing well.
Excellent. So do you want to, Clemency, do you want to start and tell us a little bit about yourself, for anybody who doesn't know you yet?
Yeah, well, hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Clemency Wright. I have a business that specialises in keywords for predominantly photographers, but creative agencies, archives, museums and galleries, all sorts of different companies. And the purpose of this is to help them organise their content so that it can be accessible to their end customers. My background is mainly with stock photography, where I trained at Getty Images roughly 20 years ago. And I've been doing this on my own now as a small business for 13 years.
Fantastic. And you've given a couple of presentations with inside my own private group, and also we've done a LinkedIn Live together before as well, haven't we? So, and yeah. I know a lot of the photographers who tuned in got a great deal from it. And Carolyn, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Carolyn Desrosiers, founder and CEO of Scribely. And my company, Scribely, specializes in writing alt text for images and audio description for videos. So we are a content accessibility solutions company. And basically what we are is a team of writers that understands how to make images and videos accessible. And we focus on taking a human approach to our work and helping our clients create really great accessible content online that everyone can enjoy.
Fantastic. And I'm actually, because for myself anyway, start with you, Carolyn, because I do understand a bit about keywords, but alt text. So what is alt text? What is it, and why do we need to use it? Why is it so important?
Sure. Yeah. So alt text, maybe just start with a definition, is a brief textual description of the purpose and meaning of an image. And it actually lives within a website's HTML code in what's called the alt attribute field. So it's behind every image that exists behind a screen. So that means websites, news feeds, image galleries, PDFs, social media, anywhere you see an image online, there's an alt tag behind that image. And the reason why it's important is because there are millions of blind and visually impaired people out there using assistive technologies to navigate the web. And without these accessible descriptions, the visual content contained within those images is extremely difficult to access, or in some cases, just completely lost altogether. So it's really useful for people who use screen readers on the web and need these alternative formats. Basically, they're navigating the web using their ears rather than their eyes to engage with visual content on the screen.
And that's on right the way across the web, isn't it? Because I've seen alt text being asked for on LinkedIn. When you upload a post to LinkedIn, it gives you the option to put alt text in. So that's exactly the same on the LinkedIn principle as on like Google and the internet.
That's right. Yeah. So LinkedIn is helping their users populate this field, but it actually exists behind every image on a website. So you'll also find it if you dig into your Squarespace site or your WordPress site. It lives somewhere behind the scenes.
Fantastic. And if anybody has any questions as well, while we're going through, just pop them in the comment section, and we can bring them up for everybody to see. And like I said at the very beginning there, that both Carolyn and Clemency are going to do a free image audit, alt text and keyword audit for up to 10 of the viewers today. And all you've got to do is pop in your details in the comment section. You should just say, I'm up for an audit, and they'll get in touch with you via the comments at the end of this webinar. So Clemency, over to you. Keywords. I mean, most of us understand what keywords are or have heard what keywords are, but a lot of us aren't really sure how to use them or what keywords we should be looking for. So what are they, and who uses them, and how can we use them better?
Well, going on from what Carolyn said, it's about accessibility. And again, every image online or in a database, so an internal database within an organization, needs to be classified so that it can be retrieved. It can't be found unless it's actually got some search data attached to it, and we call that keywords. It sits within what is broadly known as the metadata of an asset, and the asset could be a photograph, an illustration, a graphic, a video file, or it could be a text file. So there's a real object somewhere that's been digitized, and then that needs to be classified. So there's a methodology behind how we keyword. Different organizations will do it in different ways, and they'll largely tailor this to their end user. So again, as Carolyn's focuses on end users who may be using assistive technologies, my end users tend to be, or the end users for my clients tend to be sighted, but perhaps they do not know quite how to access a visual that's quite conceptual in nature. So the keywords can really help users retrieve content that is a little bit tricky, a little bit conceptual, emotive, doesn't really have nouns to describe everything. So we're trying to help them make that content accessible to sighted people, but with the understanding that not everybody looks at things in the same way, and we have different terminology to describe visual imagery. So it's an input and it's an output kind of process that we're talking about when we think about keywording.
Brilliant. And I know that that's explained quite in depth and with examples in this PowerPoint slideshow that you've put together for us. And Carolyn, there's a quick question there come from Becky with regards to alt tags. Can you see that there?
You know what? I can't. Can you read it out loud?
Yeah, so Becky's saying she has a question. How do alt tags work with voice search, such as Siri or Alexa?
Oh, that's a great question. So alt text has a secondary benefit. Its primary purpose is for accessibility purposes. But remember that Google and other search engines can't actually see these images. So alt text is really helpful for indexing purposes and also for matching search queries to results. It's been a long-standing best practices for Google Images. Even as search trends change, alt text remains as important. And the reason for that is because it does help with voice search. It basically helps, describe what's in an image. So if you're searching using voice search, Google will have an easier time matching your search to that result, to that image result. And if you're specifically, asking Siri to pull up an image, then it will directly look for within the alt tag to find that information.
Great. So it is essential that you use your alt tags within the images if you want to be found. That's brilliant.
Exactly.
And one thing that I should have added about the conceptual keywords is which is what brought Carolyn and I together really, is the fact that they can be incorporated into your alternative text. So when I'm thinking about keywording a photograph that's a conceptual photograph, and it's quite difficult to list every single thing we see because it might be an abstract type of image. Those concepts that spring to my mind that I think will be the same kind of terms that a customer might use to find that on a stock photo library site, or an art photography site, or on Google Images even. You can also incorporate those same concepts as keywords within your alt tags. So Carolyn and I kind of made that connection probably, you know, within the last 12 months, we've seen many examples of where people have successfully applied keywords, concepts, and tags, alt text within the same image. And this has a massive impact on your SEO as well, because Google will read the copy on a web page, it will look at the image, it can't see the image, as Carolyn said, but it can read the alt text. So it knows what the image is showing, it can look into the metadata to see what the keywords say. And if they correspond to the alt text and also its embedded, you know, copy that you've written on the web page, it gives you greater authority within the search engine ranking. So it does have, you know, using both of these in combination does really help boost your relevancy ranking on search engines like Google.
That's fantastic. And obviously, yeah, so both your services really complement each other, don't they?
They do. Yeah, there's a right and a wrong way to incorporate keywords, and Clemency and I have been working together on how to master that. And later on, we'll show you a few examples of the two of us joining forces and showing how to incorporate keywords into alt text the right way.
So with regards to keywords and alt text, are there any best practices that you're gonna, some top tips that you're gonna share with us as so we can start using these effectively?
Yeah, I think we'll get into some best practices later on when we get into the presentation, so that everyone can look at the screen as we talk. But yeah, we'll definitely share some best practices.
Brilliant. And so I've just got a question come up here with regards to video editing. Can you see that one, or do you want me to read it out?
Yes, and I'll read it out loud. So
Yeah.
I'm a video editor. Does the alt text and hashtag helpful for me to reach targeted buyers? I think if I'm understanding the question, alt text is directly related to images and moving images like GIFs. So that's the tag associated within the image attribute. Video accessibility is a different story. There are different requirements there. You need to get into closed captions, transcripts, and audio description, which my company Scribely also actually specializes in. But when it comes to the alt text tag, it's just for images.
Yeah, you can keyword video for uploading to stock photo libraries or any image bank, so a moving image bank as well, included with the archives. They will have a database that's powered by keywords, so the keywords connect the users with the content. And there was a fundamental question that I just saw about that, which is please explain keywords and how it works. So basically the keyword, a bit like the alt text, sits behind the image. You have to add them. They don't. You can use auto-generated, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But you have to add them. So you have to add a keyword in order for that to then be searchable as that keyword from an end user. So we're talking about work that's done behind the scenes that you think about as a strategy before you start uploading content and kind of publishing it onto websites or on search engines. And keywords just work in the same way that alt text does in that respect. But yes, if you were submitting video, for example, into a searchable database or a searchable archive, then you would need keywords to help reach your target market, and you would tailor the keywords to fit the language and the language expectations that your target customers might have.
Brilliant. And shall we bring the presentation up so we can have a look at the...
That sounds good.
Yeah, so...
Okay. All right, so I'm going to start us off today, and it might help to provide some background to alt text to know a little bit more about how many people out there might be using screen readers or text-to-speech technology. So I'm going to start off with a few statistics. According to the World Health Organization, 2.2 billion people have a near or distance impairment. This represents the size of the population that would appreciate or prefer audio formats in general, or when they're in certain situations. Maybe they have trouble when they're in low light, or maybe they're driving or multitasking. Audio experiences really benefit a wide range of people. 250 million people in the world have a moderate or severe vision impairment. And this number represents the people who may actually rely or depend on screen readers as their primary way of accessing visual information. So in this case, it might be critical for them to use their screen reader to access information on the web. But having said that, there are countless more people with diverse information processing differences, such as dyslexia, or neurodiversities, such as epilepsy or ADHD, who might find it beneficial to use a screen reader to navigate. So let me get into the slides now. And yes, so we're starting off right off the bat with my top 5 alt text tips. And I'll say alt text is deceptively simple, right? Because it's a description of the image. But when you actually get into writing it, you might find that you have a lot of questions. So here are my top 5 tips. First up, start with the primary focus of the image. And that means, with every image, there's usually a main focus or a central focus. It could be a person or an object or scenery. And you want to start there at the beginning of your alt text most of the time so that the listener can immediately visualize the most important part of that image. Next up, describe all of the relevant details. And so after you've talked about your primary focus, think about all of the important visual details in that image that seem the most relevant to you. So this can feel a little bit tricky because it's kind of subjective work, right? But remember to focus on the purpose and the meaning of the image, and just choose the details that will help you convey that. Next up, you want to try to average around 125 characters for your alt text, but definitely keep it under 250. And the reason why we do this is because we want people who use screen readers to be able to quickly navigate the images on the site and not be held back by listening to a long alt text description. Next, naturally incorporate keywords. So this is what we were talking about earlier. And I say the word naturally because it's very important not to do any keyword stuffing. This was a practice by many years ago, and just as a way to boost SEO. But Google actually flags these, and it's possible that your image may be marked as spam as a result. But aside from this, it's important to remember that people are relying on this information to navigate the web. And the primary purpose for alt text, as I said before, is accessibility. And finally, I like to end with a question to myself, actually, when I'm writing alt text. Can I visualize the same image based on just the description alone? And this is helpful because it may immediately make apparent some of the details that you left out that would be critical to effectively convey the purpose and meaning of the image. And then just to give an example of an alt text description, let's go with the image on the slide, which is a yellow and white vintage Volkswagen bus drives down a high desert road, blue skies and rust-colored sandstone rock ahead. So that's a short description. It's only 123 characters, but it packs in a lot of visual details, and it also captures the primary focus of the image, which is the vintage Volkswagen bus. That would be important for folks searching on Google for this image, and also to understand the primary purpose. Okay.
That's pretty.
Yeah. Do we have any questions?
Not yet. No.
Okay.
Oh,
great.
Okay. Yes, we've just got one come up from Thomas here. Let's have a look.
Yes. So tip number 2, you'll need to know why you picked that specific image and what your intention for including it is. If that isn't clear to you, then maybe you need to reconsider the image or the motivation for including it. I like that comment, and it gets into actually context, which I didn't include in my top 5 tips, but it's absolutely critical. Your information there's an intention behind choosing that image, and it plays a role on the page. So you need to make sure to select the right details that actually match up nicely with the surrounding content on the page in order to provide useful alt text. So that's a really good tip. Okay, so moving back to the presentation, here we have a slide up, human versus machine alt text. And I wanted to just briefly cover the differences between AI generated and human generated descriptions right now. Because there's I think a misconception out there that AI can actually handle this work for us. And my feeling on it is that AI is useful for object recognition and for certain types of tagging, but not when it comes to accessibility. And the reason is because it's too often producing inaccurate and incomplete descriptions that may ultimately be misleading for folks that are relying on these descriptions. So first up, first image on the slide, we have a human description, which is rear view of a man wearing headphones seated at a desktop computer. The AI description is a person with a ponytail. The next image is an aerial view of a workstation with laptop, flowers, coffee, and a candle. And the AI description is a table with food and a clock. And then finally, we have a front view of a vintage payphone with rotary dial mounted on a sage green wall. The AI description is a picture containing a building. So in all three of these cases, AI actually got the description wrong. And this was not difficult for me to find an example, by the way. They're just happening too often right now for us to rely on AI descriptions.
And when you say AI descriptions, is that like a plug-in software that you would use, or an app, or?
Yeah, there's a number of different ways to access AI descriptions. You can use any Microsoft program, actually. There's functionality built in to automatically attempt to write alt text for any of your images in Microsoft. Google also has AI. Facebook has AI for your alt text, as well as Instagram. I mean, a lot of these platforms and programs that we're using have AI built in. And you actually have to make an attempt to override what's there. Otherwise, the AI description will be used.
So when you say like, excuse me, like Facebook and stuff, so is that an auto-populate that automatically does that? Or so you have to switch that off to prevent that happening?
Yeah, I think if you don't populate the alt text field, then it will attempt to describe what's there. And recent news with Facebook now getting away from facial recognition, they're no longer including faces in their AI descriptions where they used to. Now it will just say two people or person rather than trying to identify the individual there. But yes, you can populate your own alt text if you don't want Facebook to describe all your images, which I would strongly advise against. The screen reader experience when you listen to that out loud and to an AI Facebook description is maybe a person walking their dog. So it uses the word maybe to say that this is a guess. All right, so moving forward. Okay, so getting into alt text best practices. These are my best recommendations for getting started for the creatives that we have on today. I suggest starting with an image audit across platforms. And what I mean by that is think about all of the places that your images are in front of your potential fans and followers, right? So the externally facing places. This could be your online portfolio, your social media, photo agencies that are publishing your images. Think about all the places they appear. And you can do this yourself, or of course, my company Scribely can help you. But this will provide you with a framework or a pathway for making your images accessible and understanding all of the different places they appear. Next, my suggestion is to basically implement a stopgap. So commit to writing your alt text for every new externally facing image from here on out. So that basically stops this practice of not including alt text on the web. A great place to start doing that is social media. You can start writing alt text for your next post. Instagram, it's found in advanced settings. Facebook, it's available when you post. LinkedIn, as we mentioned, you are prompted. But just try to start, adding those alt text descriptions in whenever you include an image.
And Philip said there, can you apply alt text in Lightroom, or is that alt text in Lightroom in later versions?
Yes. So I love that question. And we're actually going to get into that in the next live, I think, where we're going to start talking about how and where to add your alt text in. But yes, that's an exciting development. The short answer is that we now have a new IPCC field for alt text and extended description, which was added just last month. So very soon in Lightroom, you will be able to add your alt text into your photo. All right. And then, so next up, yes. Start chipping away at adding alt text for existing images. And you can do this at whatever pace works for your time and your budget, but just gradually over time for all of the images that you plan to leave on the web. Try to add your alt text descriptions after the fact. And that's also possible with social media. You can go back and add them in. Next, decide whether you want to manage your alt text on your own or with an internal team, or if you feel you don't have the time, the bandwidth, or the expertise, consider hiring an alt text vendor like Scribely to help you with this work. We are fully equipped with a writing team that is able to move through your images at whatever pace that works for you. And we are here to support you. And finally, my recommendation for best practices is update your website's accessibility statement. And if you don't have one already, definitely look into that, because it's a statement that describes what you as an individual or as an organization are doing for the accessibility of your website. And you can actually share your plan of providing alt text on your website within your statement.
Right. And you can just download these accessibility statements from, I suppose there'll be templated ones that you can tweak for your own website.
Yes, exactly. You can definitely find some templates online, but I strongly suggest making it your own and describing, what your commitment is to accessibility and the specific actions that you're taking to get there for any elements on your site that are not accessible.
Right.
All right, and that's the end of my presentation, and I'll pass it over to Clemency.
Okay, so, thanks, Carolyn. A lot of what Carolyn said really chimes with my approach to keywording as well. We're thinking about context and we're thinking about conveying meaning to people who haven't seen the content yet, whether they're cited or not cited. And obviously the keywords are the fuel behind the search engine. It's what you type into Google every time you want to hire a car or book a holiday or buy a pair of jeans. So same with imagery. If you know exactly what you want and you're looking for an image of a happy family on a summer vacation, then you can type those in as keywords and hopefully you'll get some good results. But I'm sure many of you have experienced image search either within your own organization, internal image database, or on Google Images or a stock photo library, where you are quite confused at times or bemused by the results you get back and kind of wonder how on earth the keywords you typed in brought you this set of images. Make search better if you're wondering what that refers to. This is part of a collaborative initiative that Carolyn and I have started on Instagram, and we'll talk to you about that in a minute. But Make Search Better is going to be a new branch to my business, which is Clemency Wright Consulting. So Make Search Better is aimed at all people working with visual content across all different sectors. It's not just photographers, but it can include photographers, designers, creatives in any role within this workflow. So I'm going to talk to you now, following on from what Carolyn was talking about my top tips for keywording. And the first one is relevance. And people that know what I talk about when I'm talking about keywording will know that I always talk about relevance in the same way Carolyn does when she looks at an image. And I have not admitted this to Carolyn before now, but I've always asked myself, when I look away from an image, could I describe it still without looking at it? Could I describe it in keywords that would immediately conjure up that image to another person? It's very similar to the alt text that she was describing earlier on. So every keyword is a potential search result. So for a keyword to be relevant and to give the best customer experience, the best search experience to your end user, you need to think that every time you add a keyword, it's potentially going to come up in a search for that particular keyword. And this really does stop you from over keywording or keywording with a kind of fairly weak or tenuous approach. If you just stop and question yourself at every step of the keywording process, is this going to be a really good search result for that particular keyword that I'm planning to add? So again, looking at the image or looking at the video footage, you want to make sure that the keywords you add are accurate. For this, we need to know more about the context. Again, chiming with what Carolyn said, the context is, what do we know? What's the information we know about this asset? So if it's a photograph that's location-based or if it's food-based, we can't just guess if it's vegan dish or if it's a gluten-free dish. If we're looking at food imagery or travel imagery, can't guess where it is. We need to know that information. So a lot of my work will be liaising with photographers, filmmakers, or archive managers to make sure that that information is taken from the metadata fields that they manage and brought through into keywording so that we can then surface that content for accurate keywords for the end user. And as part of that, we often look at things like model releases and property releases, particularly with stock photography collections, because as we know, image buyers will typically look for very specific information about people when they're looking for people of a certain ethnic group or a certain age or gender. They really need these keywords to be accurate, and and it's our responsibility to make sure that we're adding them in that way. My third tip would be to be applying your keywords consistently. So once you've defined what is accurate and relevant about the image and you want to convey that to an end user who is searching online, you need to get a system in place and a workflow. With stock photography uploads, there will be guidelines and there will be character limitations, much as you might have with alt text as well. We might have a cap on the number of keywords we can add. So you need to really do the research up front to get the best user experience. You want to make sure that the right number of keywords are applied. And this does vary so much. It's not possible to address that as, in today's presentation. But generally speaking, there'll be some guidelines and methodology which you can apply when you're doing your keywording for a stock photo library. And again, it'll be something that applies to internal databases as well. You can't just have a team of people adding keywords subjectively, and sometimes they forget a certain type of keyword and sometimes they add a certain type of keyword, because the user will always come to the search experience expecting consistent results, and it's the keywords that we apply strategically that will give them those consistent results. So my fourth top tip is to be user-focused, and this is about search language. So we're talking about accessibility in general, and accessibility of content online requires you to add keywords, not just for what we can actually see in a photograph, but what we are trying to get across visually. So we're starting to think a little bit more about the way people use language now to locate imagery or to locate footage. It might not be just simple nouns to describe objects, as in the case with AI. AI is quite good at identifying objects within an image, for example, but it wouldn't be so good at understanding the emotional expression of a person, or the context or the concept behind those objects. So again, the context as keyworders allows us to then invest further value into the image and further value into the search experience by making sure that we're focusing the language on terms that your customers will be using themselves and understand. And finally, you would like to think that keywords reflect the world we live in today. So there's a lot of change happening all the time on a global scale. Visual media really exists to communicate. It's non-verbal, so it has to convey some feeling or message just through the image itself. And in order for organizations to manage and produce and distribute and retrieve all of this content, they need these keywords to reflect these changes, and they could be social or they could be economic or political. But we certainly see in the way visual media is used that the conceptual meaning has a huge value for the brand and the brand communication and the visual storytelling that the brand is looking to perform with its end users and to attract new customers. So we're layering up keywords in this sense of not just adding keywords to classify and to describe what we can see, but we're thinking about concepts in a way that will add another layer, another dimension to the search experience and help broaden your reach and reach new audiences and new markets. So those would be my top tips. So the next part of this little presentation is best practice. So when I approach keywording, as I've discussed already, I like to think, what would you remember if you looked at this image and looked away? Because that will help you form your keywords. And actually, the majority of keywords we find we add when we're keywording for clients is just visual attributes, which is when you start with what you can see in the picture. So we might say roughly, this isn't an exact science, but roughly 80% of the keywords we add will be who is in the image, what is in the image, and where is the image. And it's really the kind of nuts and bolts. It's the non-negotiable elements. It's the visual attributes that everybody would agree on. But then obviously on top of that, we want to try and help organizations and brands communicate visually and attract new customers and engage with their market. So these concept keywords make the kind of final layer, if you like, to optimize, to further kind of broaden reach for this content within the digital space. So as I say, it's not an exact science, but this graphic here illustrates how if you start with the basics and the who and the what and the where is happening inside this picture or in the video footage, you can then enhance that with conceptual keywords, which really do add another dimension. And we'll have a look at an example of that now as well. So we're really lucky today that we actually have Philip on the presentation with us. So Philip's already asked a question about, can we use alt text in Lightroom? Philip and I, Philip is a very professional stock photographer who sells his content on image libraries, including Alamy. And this image here, as you can see, is a fantastic shot of the red arrows, formation flying, lovely blue sky in the background, the vapor trails coming out. It's a classic, iconic shot. Philip and I engaged on a post recently on LinkedIn, which you can see here, the comments that we shared on this post, to say that it wasn't actually the red arrows that sold this image to the image buyer. It was the concepts, team, and trust. So if you imagine that when Philip was keywording this picture, he definitely added the red arrows and formation flying and blue sky and vapor trail. But he went one stage further. He added that 20% special ingredient, which is the concepts, team, and trust. And this is exactly what the search engine tells Philip sold the picture. So the concepts can sell the content in a way that just simply adding basic tags for what you can see don't. I'm not saying don't have the basic tags for what you can see, but I'm certainly encouraging people here on today's presentation to think about the conceptual meaning and the message behind an image, because this is what really elevates it and optimizes it for creative image buyers.
That's brilliant. That's a great explanation of it, isn't it? So you've got to think conceptual is like maybe a meaning or a feeling or something that you can't identify as a physical thing, but then what that and it could be as simple as maybe if you had a couple walking along a beach holding hands in hands, and you see the beach and you see the couple, but then you can't say for certain it's a holiday, but it could mean holiday, or it could mean romance, or it could mean happiness.
Yeah, there was another great example of Philips actually that we were chatting about earlier, where I think it was kind of a financial company, some sort of investment firm were looking to use an image to convey, the future of financial planning and what direction, to help advise their clients to go towards. And the image was just a beautiful shot of a scenic, a landscape, rural landscape with a classic wooden public footpath sign pointing to the distance, to which Philip had added the concept direction, which some people and an AI certainly an AI tool would certainly add the signpost and the field and possibly rural, outdoors, day, these kind of bog standard terms. But it was the keyword direction. What did that signpost mean? And then also, what does that concept direction, which the photographer added, do to help image buyers? So people who are busy searching for images as their day job, they spend on average, I think it's 7 hours a week searching for pictures in creative agencies. And a lot of the times it's because either the keywords are very weak and they lead you down the wrong path, or the concepts are missing and people are left to sort of wade through, well, thousands or hundreds of thousands of images, when really what they want is an image that captures a concept. And I think that when you add these concepts, you'll be surprised just how directly you can reach a creative image buyer.
And Rachel's saying, how can you think in concepts? Any tips on how you can think in concept?
Yeah, I've done talks on keywording a lot in the past, and I don't have much time to go into details, but there's kind of 3 types of keyword that I would advise you to think about. The first one is the visual attributes, which is the what can you see? And then the next stage is associated terms. So my process mentally is, what can I see? What do I need to keyword that's visually evident? But then I ask myself, what does that mean? So again, if I was keywording Philip's photograph of the field with the signpost, I would keyword the field and the signpost, but then I would think, what does that mean? So what do you think about when you think of a signpost? Is it guiding you? Is it giving you some direction? Is it giving you hope? Is it about aspiration? Is the signpost, what type of signpost is it? Is it quite, is it an emergency signpost that speaks of urgency, emergency services or disaster? Or is it a signpost that's just helpful? So it's, assistance, it's support, it's guidance. So I think you just look at, when you're looking at a visual example and thinking about what's literally happening, it kind of naturally leads you on to, well, what does that mean and why is that important? And then you get onto the concepts which come as a result of that. And just to put you in the picture, a library like Getty Images will have around 300 concepts. Some of them are quite similar, and they do, relate to each other, but there's a lot of concepts that are at your disposal. And obviously with keywording, the more niche you are and the more less competitive that concept keyword is for your content, the more likely you are to surface higher up in the search page results as well.
Brilliant.
I'll just quickly check if there's any more questions on that. So the lesson is not to ignore what the image represents and focus only on what the image is, kind of like a forest versus trees thing. So I think the lesson is to think in 2 different ways. So what is the image representing and what is in the image? And this goes back to my point about visual attributes and associated keywords. So if you can crack that and think about the image in 2 languages, if you like, then you are almost, broadening and doubling up your potential audience for that image to be found online. So this final slide in my presentation just is a screenshot taken from the Save the Children Twitter feed. Save the Children, a client of mine, they use imagery in a very meaningful way, obviously, to try and communicate the worthwhile causes that they are engaged with. And to do this, they use imagery that's very powerful. Obviously, it's very emotive for a reason. Its purpose is to engage attention and to promote funds, so donations and membership. So we're looking at images here that have a real purpose and a real sense that we need imagery to be catalogued, to be produced, classified, catalogued, retrieved and used in social media, so that an organisation, a non-profit charity like Save the Children, can really attract attention of potential funders. And what we can see here is that there's a few words that crop up. Now, these are just words, but they are also keywords. And you might see on the bottom left there that they are also hashtags. So this is where keywords, hashtags as keywords, alternative text, which, further includes some of these keywords, all starts to come together on a social media platform like Twitter. So if Carolyn was writing alt text for these images, she'd probably be using a lot of the exact same keywords that we can see on this page: education, protection, generation, climate crisis. These are the sorts of keywords that they'll be using in their copy. So they'll be thinking about it from a content marketing point of view. They'll be using them to tag the images in their internal image bank, which is accessed by their global teams. And they'll be using the same keywords to help promote the engagement on social media as well. They've also used archival imagery. So the image here of a before and after, 20 years apart, the young man on the right in 1997, and then in 2017, they're using archival imagery. So obviously they've got an archive there that has the name of this person, or the specific project that this person was involved in. So this is about traceability, so that we can retrieve content and use it in very powerful and engaging ways to serve a humanitarian purpose. So obviously I'm extremely proud to work with an organization like this using keywords.
And then Thomas has just said, so is it as clear as always representing both the abstract, and I think you said that's the case, isn't it? So that 80-20, the abstract and the concrete aspect of every image every time.
So every image is different. I think one of the problems with auto-generated keywording is that it tends to bulk assign keywords. So it might get a shoot of images and decide that all those images are of the child being vaccinated. So we'll add vaccine, immunization, medical, healthcare to every single image. And that's one of the downsides. It's also a weakness with certain outsourced keywording outfits that work at scale very, very quickly to get through, lots and lots of images. So I work on an image by image basis. I will certainly be aware that if there's a shoot and it's got a certain kind of theme or a certain concept behind it, but image by image, you might find that there's a greater or lesser degree of weighting in that 80-20 ratio. The ratio is a bit like a volume. You turn up the volume when you need to for concepts, but you might reduce it in other times. And I was thinking of an example of this earlier, which is an image of a bus, going down the high street. It's about transport. That's not really a concept. It's a topic. But the topic of transport and the bus as a keyword, which is, an objective thing, can also mean different things. It could mean someone's commuting to work. Maybe they're rushing and it's about being late. Maybe it's about stress, or maybe it's about taking your children, on a day trip. So it's about leisure time and family bonding activities. So again, you need to look at the bus on the high street on the image itself and decide what the conceptual value is before you can really start adding those concept keywords. Hopefully that helps to answer.
Fantastic, thank you. So you've had a collaboration together with keywords and alt text on a project on Instagram. That's right.
Yes. Just for the past few weeks, and it's been really great to collaborate with Clemency. And this all kind of started off because I had this idea to make Scribely's Instagram into just basically a showcase of not only beautiful photos, but also how to write alt text. So I started posting images from stock photo agencies and making sure to credit the photographer and linking to their work, and just writing a simple alt text description in the caption. And the idea was to make Scribely's Instagram a constant stream of alt text samples that help people kind of get the hang of how to write quality image descriptions for their fans and followers. But then we've really turned it up with Clemency coming in the mix and starting to describe keywords as well for these posts.
Brilliant.
So Clemency, you want to go through a few examples that we've posted recently? I don't know how many we have the time for. We have 5 prepared, but the first one up is under the category food. So we wanted to find an image that represented that. And the alt text description is: person's hands gently pull apart a cracked egg, releasing a yolk that falls towards a well of flour shaped like a volcano. And I wanted to point out a few things about alt text. The most important part of alt text is actually describing what's visually there. And we try to stay away from interpreting because the alt text is supposed to actually replace the image. So we're actually getting into the cracked egg and the yolk that's falling from the eggshells. And, we're verging on, just making a comparison with, describing the flour well as shaped like a volcano, just so people can get a sense of what that shape is. So it's different from keywords in the sense that we're actually describing what's visually present there. But Clemency, you want to talk through your concepts?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Carolyn. It's just actually dawned on me, volcano would be a terrible keyword for this picture because it isn't a volcano, but it's absolutely correct in the context of what you're trying to do here, which is convey an image to someone who can't see the image or can't see the image at that point in time. So for me, I'm thinking about how can I keyword the photograph so someone coming onto a blank search box can type some keywords in, get this image back and think, yes, that is what I intended when I used that keyword or that concept when I was searching. So, of course, these are concept examples. You may have other ideas, and this is always a really interesting part of my work, is to see how people respond to the concepts I come up with, and this happens within my team as well. But this is not a list of keywords. Obviously, I haven't got egg or flower in these suggested concepts. So these are just a few concepts that spring to my mind that would help somebody, like particularly a creative image buyer who's looking for an image to convey maybe the simplicity of making food or homemade food, the fact that they want to see ingredients. And again, I think, we're thinking about cultural context, and I talked about user focus, and I talked about trends. Resourcefulness is such a big thing at the moment. It's the concept we've talked about a lot during the pandemic. People, having to actually, work out how to make their own food and put things together themselves. And I think the point to make here is that if you are in a marketing or communications agency or an advertising agency and you want to do an ad campaign, or you're doing a campaign of some kind, creative communication, and you're not really bothered about seeing a picture of an egg being cracked, but you want to somehow get across this idea that preparation of something and the skill that goes into that could be relevant for you to tell that story visually, then this would be a really good example. So you don't always know what the end use of the image will be, but you know that the concepts you add could be interpreted by different end users in different ways. And I think that's the really lovely thing about keywording. You can give them both exactly what it is showing in the picture, but also you can give them more creative ideas about and how that picture could then be used. So yeah, thanks for that example,
That's
Karen.
brilliant. That's fantastic.
Okay, next up we have sustainability as a category, and the alt text for this image is an ivory-colored mesh produce bag with bright yellow lemons and prickly pears rests on its side on a seamless white surface. So again, we're focusing on the visual details here, but trying to pack in as many keywords as possible.
Again, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. On the concepts.
Again, just a few concepts that reiterating what I said earlier. What does it mean? This is a string bag. I would call this a string shopping bag. But what does that mean? So it springs to mind sustainability because you're reusing the bag. So this is why we would have this as a concept. Retail, obviously, is more broadly applicable to the concept of retail. Again, healthy eating, because we've got fresh unprepared food here that somebody's carrying home in the shopping bag to make their own food with. So it's looking at those things that Carolyn's captured through the alt text, which really paint this picture in your mind's eye. If you had your eyes closed as she read that, you would have something very similar in your mind's eye to what this image is showing. But then you can use those to ask yourself, and what does that mean? So therefore, what are the concepts driving this image? And these should be the keywords that you should be thinking to add to help your creative buyers.
Great. Next, we have a business image. The alt text is a young man wearing a t-shirt, baseball cap, plugs, and glasses sits back casually in a chair in a trendy office space. He's holding up his hands as if to do a friendly shrug at someone just out of view. So here, rather than labeling this young man, I'm describing some of the visual details that I think are relevant to get a sense of what he looks like, because he has a very distinctive appearance. And also he's interacting clearly. So I wanted to describe, the motions that indicate that he may be speaking to someone in the room.
Good. And Becky's just says she doesn't quite follow how we combine the alt text and keywords concepts to get and the concept keywords together.
Yeah, so I think we mentioned earlier that a lot of the concepts that we might add to an image are naturally going to fit into your alt text, and Carolyn's given us some examples of that. But it's not always the case, because sometimes you'll have terms in your alt text that you can't use as a keyword. For example, the volcano description of the flower, and sometimes you'll have a concept that you don't use in your alt text because it might be tricky for Carolyn to put individuality in alt text, because that doesn't really, as a keyword or a concept, it doesn't really help convey to somebody who's unable to see this image what they're actually going to see, because individuality is so conceptual. It's more drawing the difference between the keywords here are being used by a search engine to find the image result, and the alternative text is what's driving the descriptive aspect of the image to describe, so that somebody who's unable to see the image can visualize what that image is showing. So they do link, and they do often appear in the same space, but that is not necessarily always the case. Then they can work independently as well.
Right. And I just add to that the difference between keywords and concepts. So the alt text does incorporate keywords. If you were looking for a young man wearing a baseball cap, using those keywords might help you find this image. But Clemency is taking it a step further with keywords that are actually more like concepts, where these keywords could be found around this image, or if they're not attached to the image, based on what kind of context that you're going for. So she's taking it a step further with the keywords.
Great. I mean, I think that would be quite interesting to, if you got into writing this alt text and did a few images, and then said to a friend who hadn't seen the image, and you described the alt text and then brought up the image and said, did you picture that in your mind?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
So I think you did that recently, didn't you, Carolyn? You did it with the IPTC presentation the other week.
I did.
I think somebody had used that, and it worked really well. Yeah, you could just try that yourself if you're a photographer looking to do your alt text or keywords. You can have a try and see if anybody around you can visualize what you're actually explaining.
Yeah.
Right. So the next one we're calling experimental, and the alt text is profile of a young blonde-haired man wearing a black t-shirt against a rainbow backdrop. A strip of aluminum foil is wrapped around his face and neck, held in place by his fingertips, tensely pressing in at his temple and his jawline. So again, here we're avoiding any sort of interpretation, but there's energy and meaning coming from the way that he's holding his fingers against his head. But we can dive a bit further into the concepts with Clemency's keywords.
Yeah, so I think starting keywording at Getty, a lot of the images that I trained on were like this. They were conceptual in nature. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Tony Stone collection, but when I started keywording first, I worked on that collection every day as a keyworder at Getty. And I think what Carolyn said there about the tension, the actual composition and the pressure and the strain that we can see in the person's fingers means something. So again, the first layer, your 80% of keywords, will be some of these things Carolyn's mentioned in her alt text, the hands, the foil, the face that's wrapped in the foil. But the concepts are, well, what does that mean? What is the image? It's not just a hand holding the foil to the face. There's a sense here that this person's quite, trapped by the foil, so it's quite traumatic. And then the concept of any face that's obscured generally in the world of commercial photography is about identity, or in this case, anonymity. And what can these things be used for? I'm thinking about the creative buyers out there who might be looking for a campaign around mental health, and I feel that this could be quite a good conceptual result. So rather than having to search through mental health images that all look, a little bit stereotypical or a little bit unexperimental, this is a really nice example where we've used, the combination of the description, the keywords and the concepts to kind of help optimize that for different types of users looking for imagery to use in different ways.
That's a great example. And I think, you see this when you do a lot of searches, and when I'm putting PowerPoint presentations together for doing talks, and I type in a particular idea or a concept, then you see the images come up. And when you start doing this on Google and you can see, then you can, this all ties in with, especially with that last image there.
Great. And I'm going to run through this one quickly because I know we're running out of time. The alt text is an arty side profile of a Black and Asian person touching chins together while bending heads back to look up. A white brick background accentuates the irregular diamond-shaped space between them and the contours of the face and body. And I decided to try to attempt to describe the artistry of this photo while also capturing what I felt was the category of this, which was diversity. But Clemency, maybe share your concept keywords here.
Yeah, so concept keywords can include, as is the case here, things to describe the composition or the technical aspect of the image. So symmetry is a really nice concept. People look for symmetry if they're talking about balance, and especially with this theme being diversity, this is a great visual metaphor for symmetry, where we've got people from different ethnic backgrounds. And just to point out here, when Carolyn and I first started collaborating on Instagram and posting these weekly, which you'd be welcome to go along and have a look at those, and we talked about diversity with the sense that we need to be able to verify the information around ethnicity, around gender, around sexual orientation, because these are the types of keywords that organizations themselves looking to be more accessible are searching for. So we can't go into detail about that today, obviously, with time being short, but there are a lot of other interesting discussions to be had around how do we keyword people and how do we get across the idea that these are ethnically diverse if we don't perhaps have a model release or we don't have the verifiable information. And as a keyword, I think I mentioned previously, it's our responsibility to make sure we add everything has to be accurate and factually correct. So this is about the accuracy being one of my top 5 tips. But yeah, concepts here, which I thought really helped convey the image message, was bonding, connections, individuality, identity, symmetry, unity, and togetherness. So these might change over time depending on the context of the world that we live in and the way we view people's identities, but these are the kind of keywords, concepts that I would be applying to this type of image right now.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. And I've got a quick question there off Akshay, who says, what's a good place to draw ideas from if I want to work on maximizing conceptual terms?
And or alt text descriptions.
Yeah.
So actually, are you thinking about developing work? So in terms of creating a portfolio, if that's the case, then a lot of the major stock photo libraries have galleries and portfolios that you can go to and have a look at some of their themes and concepts that they are promoting. And these could be done on a kind of monthly newsletter type thing, a feed, or you can just go along and have a look at their main top selling themes. These will give you some ideas on how to maximize the concepts for your own content. And you might find that you get some new ideas for existing content. You might have an archive of images that you think just show, animals on safari, when actually you go and look at the animals on safari on some of the stock sites, and you see that they've got some interesting concepts like stealth or pride or, grace. Some of these concepts that come up around animals can be quite interesting. And I think that would be my suggestion from the keywording side.
Carolyn, with regards to alt text?
Yeah, with regards to alt text, I would suggest, actually, there are a number of articles published, on the Scribely blog and then elsewhere about how to write alt text, and they provide a really excellent guide. There's a lot of information out there because alt text at this point has been a requirement for over 20 years. So I would say if you want to start practicing, there's a lot of support out there on the web in terms of providing a guide. But then I also just suggest starting yourself and working out some of the kinks, because I think you'll find that you have a lot of questions with alt text as you get started. But just start implementing it right away, and I think you'll get there.
Brilliant, thank you. And then obviously, if everybody wants to connect with you too, as well, through LinkedIn, and then if they have any questions or they want to find out more about working with you together on their images, either for their website or for stock sites or their social media, then that's something you can discuss further. And we've talked that we're potentially going to do another presentation in a while about how to use your keywording and alt text for the most popular social media platforms for photographers.
Yes, we'd like to do that. Carolyn and I will work on that and when we can do that for you. And just while I think of it, Carolyn, I hope you don't mind me mentioning, but we were going to say or ask Jeff to mention that this whole presentation itself has been made accessible as well. Did you just want to mention that quickly before people shoot off?
Yes, so we have added all of the alt text and also the reading order into these slides. We've also made an attempt to describe anything visual. So this presentation is an example of accessibility.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And obviously, I think we got a lot of people at the very beginning adding comments there, and we said that you would do a free keyword and alt text audit for the first 10 people to comment, or we'll pick 10 people out of the comments. So if you haven't had a chance yet, stick your names in the comments. Just say, I'm up for a free keyword and an alt text audit, or I'm up for a free audit. And then after we come off the live, Carolyn and Clemency will go back into the questions, into the comments, and connect with you, and then drop you a message. And from my point of view, if anybody has anyone that would like to see doing a webinar with and doing a live with, if you have any recommendations for people or companies or influencers or other people within the photography industry you'd like me to try and get on board, I've got a few more exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks before Christmas, then drop me a message and I'll connect with these people and see if we can bring them in and give us, because these lives that I'm doing are all about giving value, helping photographers and helping creatives improve their business and ultimately build their brand and make a lot more money.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jeff.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone for the great questions.
Brilliant. And keep your eye on the LinkedIn posts coming up over the next few weeks, and we'll get a date together to do that other session together with regards to keywording and alt text for your photography social media platforms. So thanks everybody, and look forward to seeing you in the next live. And thanks for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and a really informative slideshow as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.